Welcome and good evening, friends. Very happy to be here with you for this, our sixth installment of the Amplify series. And happy to see some familiar faces and lots of returning guests. I see there are folks still connecting. So just want to give a little space for folks to really arrive here in our Zoom for this evening's conversation. So once again, welcome. My name is Monique Schubert, and I'm happy to welcome you to this Amplify series on behalf of Kripalu, the Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health. So I'll start out by just telling you a little bit about Amplify series and about the guests that we'll have this evening to guide the talk and the workshop. Amplify is a series that's new to Kripalu this year. And it's really an effort by Kripalu to join forces with change makers around the globe, with those who work to dismantle inequity and harm, who steward the planet, who prioritize collective wellness, and who cultivate interdependent liberation. Throughout history, the voices of the global majority, Black, Brown, Indigenous, people of color, have been at the forefront of breaking down barriers of systemic issues that affect the planet and humanity, and also ushering in radical change. Whether this has been bringing yoga to the West, or fighting for justice on the front lines, or stewarding natural resources. Now is a time that requires us to listen, to heal historical wounds, and to do things differently. We enter this work as an act of community care because we know that none of us can be well until all of us are well. This week and next week will be the last of our live sessions, but if you have registered for them, all of them will be available on our Kripalu website to watch as replays. Abigail just dropped a link in the chat where you can find the videos that are hosted on our site. Our amazing lineup has included some really powerful change makers of our times: Adrienne Marie Brown, Mia Herndon, Milana Snow, and Lauren Ash, Yoli Maya Ye and Aja Shah, Seher Sikandar, and Njafe Isis Adewale, Rauda Rahman, and Mia Park. All of these amazing presentations that we've had. Of course, tonight we'll be joined by Hawah Kasat and Abdul Muhammad II. And I'll tell you a little bit about them this evening. And I just want to say, if anyone is new to Kripalu, and I know we have at least one new visitor to Kripalu via this portal, Kripalu wants to really acknowledge the land on which it exists, which with gratitude and humility, we acknowledge that we are working and practicing and gathering on the ancestral homelands of the Munsee Mohican people, who were the indigenous inhabitants and stewards of that land. And despite the hardship that they have endured, being forced from their land and into Wisconsin, which happened quite some time ago and is really their new home, they do come back to Kripalu, some of the good folks. In fact, the first Amplify talk included Sean Stevens, who is of the Munsee Mohican, and we continue to be grateful for the stewardship that they showed over this land and to honor their contributions. And so with that, it is my honor to begin to introduce our guests. First, I want to introduce you to Hawah Kasat, who is an artist, educator, author, community organizer, and a yogi. He is the founder and senior advisor of One Common Unity, a nonprofit that supports a movement for peace, education, and the building of nonviolent culture through music and art. Currently, the OCU, One Common Unity, runs dynamic programming in 24 schools throughout Washington, D.C., and serves over 3,500 youth and families each year. In 2019, Hawah was honored to receive Georgetown University's Legacy of a Dream Award at the Kennedy Center. This university presents the award annually to an inspiring, emerging leader whose work embodies the values and the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In his spare time, Hawah enjoys finding new foods to mix with chocolate, climbing trees and buildings, doing handstands on furniture, hiking through mountains with flip-flops, body surfing ocean waves, making animal sounds and bird calls, enjoying a glass of wine at high altitude, doing board conference calls while standing on his head, lighting candles in dark rooms, and traveling. And if you want to get more of Hawah, he will be at Kripalu this summer teaching yoga in our R&R program, leading both online and on-campus programs, and will be there as a sacred artist in residence. And I'm happy to introduce, in addition to Hawah, Abdul Muhammad II, who brings over 20 years of experience as a brand growth strategist and a digital marketer. He is an executive coach, a speaker, and a mindful practitioner. As the founder of MDM Ventures and chief growth officer, he specializes in business growth. MDM's people, brand, and technology focuses on businesses ranging from 3 million to 31 million, dedicated to social impact within the health and wellness, travel and tourism, real estate, and technology industries. For nearly 30 years, Abdul has championed the Quality of Life Center in Southwest Florida, an organization that provides at-risk children with the tools they need to make a difference in arts, character, and education. With the new and expanded programs for community development, including mental health and wellness, entrepreneurship, and workforce development, these make up the 3 tiers of QLC's mission of personal and community transformation. Over the last decade, Abdul intertwined his dedication to mindset, community, and consciousness into his daily lifestyle. As a certified breathwork coach, martial artist, yogi, and partner in refreshment, he delivers a unique mind development mastery practice that provides a transformative lifestyle resource for those seeking personal and professional growth via mindfulness. His motto, breathe in, let out, create. And so with that, it is a pleasure and an honor to introduce you to our guest this evening. And I will pass the mic to Hawah.
Thank you so much, Monique, Abigail, all the people behind the scenes at Kripalu. Thanks for inviting us in to this important conversation around the voices from around the world that have traditionally been suppressed and oppressed. Welcome, all of you who have joined us. I love seeing some familiar faces, and really wonderful that you've taken time out of your evening to join us for this conversation that Abdul and I are about to jump into and dive into with you. I invite you to take a second, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that I'm on right now. I just got to Washington, D.C. today. I've been traveling a lot over the past year and a half. I'm like a turtle with my home on my back at the moment, but in this present moment, I am in Washington, D.C. on the ancestral homelands of the Piscataway and the Masawamek and other indigenous tribes whose land was stolen and taken from them. And I just want to honor that legacy and the space that I'm on. Abdul, do you want to take a moment and share the land?
Sure. I am presently in Miami, Florida, and definitely a home that has been the natural state and place of many indigenous tribes and people, Immokalee and several others. So I just want to take a moment and breathe in and let out love and grace for all of those ancestors who have paved the way for us, for unity and for Earth, for Mother Earth.
Ashe. We also just going to take a moment. I'm going to invite you all to just take your hands and just shake your hands out for a second with me like this. A little bit of just back and forth. Nice. And then point your palms towards your screens and then go this way, back and forth. There you go. Great. And now take your hands and begin to move them up to the sky. we're so much in our bodies. I mean, we're so much in our heads that it's really nice to just get into our bodies for a second. So keep shaking your hands a little, maybe move a little side to side. There you go. And start to get your shoulders moving a little up and down. There you go. Abdul is really getting into that. Loving it, loving it. Some more shoulder shrugs, everybody. Some shoulders up and down. There we go. Yeah. And then I'm going to invite you to do one more thing. It's a little out there, but I'm just going to have you like really loosen your jaw and your fingers. And just shake your head back and forth and let your lips kind of swing with it. So it goes like this. There you go. All right. How does that feel? Everybody feel pretty good? Amazing. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. And that was not totally planned. Abdul and I, we've had a chance to now meet and connect multiple times since we were invited to be a part of the Amplify Voices of the Global Majority series. And getting to know Abdul has been a great gift for me to find a fellow brother that's so deeply committed to the struggle. This is going to be a conversation that the two of us have over the next hour, and then at the end we'll have Q&A and some opportunity for you to ask questions. But we're going to kind of just ping back and forth and talk with each other about the things that have been resonating with us and what's been coming up for both of us as men of color that have been working in the mindfulness, health and wellness, and community healing, liberation space between the two of us for over 40 years. So Abdul, bringing it to you right here. We've come together and we're both on this journey, and we don't end up on this journey without the things that shaped us. There's reasons we've chosen to be where we are. There's reasons we've dedicated our lives to the work we're doing, and these childhood experiences that shape us are such an indicator of why we are where we are now in our lives. So I'd love for you to start sharing with everyone that's tuned in a childhood experience that you've had with racism, something about your backstory that was really impactful in your life and that kind of has propelled and helped shape who you are in the world today and has brought you to where you are. So, and please keep in mind, everybody, Abdul and I were talking just like a week ago, and we both have so many experiences with racism that we could share, but we both were trying to just pick one out of many. And so we kind of intentionally just picked one each to kind of begin to create some framework for why we are so dedicated to what we do. So Abdul, do you want to share one of your experiences?
Sure, Hawah. As you mentioned, there are quite a few experiences, and I grew up in Harlem, New York, and we're talking back in the day, mid 80s, early 90s. Harlem was not at all anything like what it is today, with the Whole Foods there and, nice brownstones. I mean, Harlem was what we called the ghetto. It was hardcore violence and, sirens and drug abuse, on the street. I lived in 147th between 7th and 8th and what we call the projects, and everybody that I knew there were on, food stamps, welfare, or the like. And it was rough. It really was rough. I was blessed that, in the early 90s, my dad moved us out of the city, and we had an opportunity to live in the suburbs in Florida, Southwest Florida. And, again, lots of different things, but one that really draws attention to me was the difference in growing up in Harlem around that environment and then going to South Florida. One instance in particular, as I started to acclimate in my high school there, I got along with everybody. I was always brought up and raised to sort of see beyond race, although I knew it existed. And I got friendly with the white kids that were in my school, despite me only being one of 60 of the black kids in the whole high school at the time. And I was in high school, and like most other high schools, I'm interested in dating and having fun. And so, I ended up dating a white girl when I was in high school, and everything was going great. We had a lot of time, and I would hear talk here and there, racist comments and things like that, but nothing ever too serious or anything that sort of discouraged us. But one night in particular, we were out and we went on a date, having great fun. It was a late night. We were checking out a movie at the Bell Tower Mall, sitting there relaxing. And we get into the movie theater, and shortly after the lights went out, we started to hear kind of whispering in the back, and I just felt this energy, and you could hear pss, pss, talking. That talking started to escalate into name calling and slurs, the N word, and direct calls and threats about, N lover was the way that they, referred to the white woman that I was with at the time. This started to escalate, and it got a little scary, to be quite honest. And I did that whole look back where I let them know, hey, we're here, we're listening to you, thinking that hopefully that would sort of dissuade their chatter. But what it did is actually elevated it even more. And I noticed it was two guys. They were big guys, big white guys, and two women. And so this chatter kept going on, and it actually got to the place where we were getting thrown jujubes and gums and things at our heads. And so I started to get seriously concerned and threatened. And what I did was I got up, walked out of the place and went and spoke to the manager to let them know that something was going on. Because we learned early on as black men, there's going to be an altercation, do as much as you can to get on record what's going on before things go down. So I did that. The manager was aware. I told him about the issue, and he commented, why don't you just move out of their range or move out of their way, rather than sort of addressing the issue while I'm there really scared for my life, like, hey, there's something going on. Anyway, I go back in, meet up with the girl. Didn't want her to be alone for too long after I notified them. The threats kept going, but died down as the movie continued. We get out of the movie theater, fast forward, and we're walking to the parking lot. Now it's after midnight. This group of individuals, two big men and two women, continue to harass and follow us out of the theater. We get into our car. We're trying to leave. They get into their truck, a big truck, and attempt to seal off our way out of the parking lot. I got really, really scared as I look at this pickup truck, and you can see the rack with the rifle in it, the hunting rifle, and big pickup truck with the dually. And one of these men jumps out of the car, big guy, and starts to walk toward the vehicle. And at this time, I've been trained in martial arts. I am from Harlem, and I did learn how to take care of myself. So, what really was there for me was fear for this woman that I was with. I could, worst case scenario, get out and run, protect myself, etc. But I really, really started to get scared because of the violent, just horrible, misogynist things that they were saying to this woman because she simply happened to be here with a black man enjoying a movie. We're kids. And that escalated to the point of serious threat. It got to a place where I had to jump out of the vehicle to actually protect and defend both her and I. I told the woman that I was with, hey, just get the heck out of here. Drive the car, run. Don't even worry about me. I'll figure it out. Just run. Call the cops. Do not forget about me. Call the cops and tell them to come here and let them know that I didn't do anything, that it wasn't me that started this. Please, please, begging her to get on record. And then I jumped out of the vehicle to go ahead and face this very violent threat of two big white 6-foot men calling me the N-word, threatening my life and the life of this beautiful woman that I was with, purely because of our race. That instance right there changed my life. Changed my life forever. My relationship to my blackness, my privilege being a black man, having white friends and being accepted in, but the fact that everyone else outside of that doesn't necessarily hold that safe space, it hit me on so many different levels. The misogyny, the hate for the woman that I was with. Why? So I'll stop there. I know I said a lot, I'm getting a little emotional even thinking about it, but that was a big turning point for me in relationship to who I am, who I need to be in the world in regards to freedom and standing up for humanity, not just black men and us being in that situation, but for this white woman that was there with me, experiencing this with me. There was no separation with her
Right.
and I in that moment of hatred and oppression because simply of a race. So I'll stop there and kind of just push that back and
Right.
take a moment.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Bro, you sharing that story, first of all, thank you for sharing the vulnerability of that story. It, uh, it the truck and the rifle was like Ahmaud Arbery. And the connection that you must have felt to Ahmaud Arbery when you learned about his murder. And for those that don't remember, this was in Georgia, when he was running through the neighborhood and was chased and pinned down and murdered. Um, those individuals who shot and killed him have been convicted, as you all know. But Abdul, if you could, like, for a moment, speak about how, when you learned about Ahmaud Arbery's murder, especially the nature of how it happened, and then this experience that you had in childhood and high school, that in so many ways almost resembles the situation that he was in. Could you speak to that for a minute?
Sure, sure. I mean, obviously, when it hit me, like many others, just devastating, right? And then when you really get to the details, it is again something that for me was so many years ago, but just to be in the situation that this is still happening, there still is this level of hatred, and not only hatred, but the fact that so many people feel empowered and emboldened to act violently based on their belief and that we really aren't safe. Freedom and justice for all, freedom and liberty, like what this country stands for. My father fought in the U.S. Army to defend our rights. As black African people, our ancestors built the place for free, and even still, this is the level of fear that we as individuals have to live walking in the land, just simply breathing, running, exercising, right? And just enjoying a movie. And the fact that, even in a day and age where we've had a black president, there still is that level of ignorance and violence and hatred and racism out there on our streets. It just really blew my mind. It blew my mind and it hurt my heart. And it motivated me to continue in the work that we do, which is a work for humanity and unity. And regardless of how many white people have shown me hatred and racism, I root myself in the fact that so many more white people have shown me love. And that allows me to be in hope and continue to come to platforms like this where we're bridging unity and seeking allyship and sharing the type of stories that make a difference. Because have you not understand that experience, hopefully this opens up some hearts and compassion for those of you who have white children, mothers, parents that are in school and relating and in that. I hope that this is, sharing that this over 20, 30 years ago, we're still in that situation. So for me, it was, it was and is still tough, Hawah,
Yeah.
to really be in the impact of what that means for us as a people and for us as humanity, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I know I shared a lot, but I know that there has to be similar experiences for you. So, that was something that defined it for me. And I know you also, like you mentioned, had several other experiences shape that. But I'm curious about, what experiences you've had, and in particular, how that has impacted you and the work that you do as it relates to your work with the youth in DC.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what really comes up for me too in your share is not just the physical safety and um, the physical threat of having your life in danger. And you really toned the story down from when we spoke about this story like a week ago. Like, everyone has gotten the sort of like the more censored version of this story, which is a very intense story. But what also comes up for me is the emotional safety and the emotional trauma that is a part of an experience like that. For me, I mean, I was born in New Jersey, to create a little bit of context for people. Born in New Jersey and grew up in, the mid 80s, late 80s, early 90s, at a time when people of color in the school that I was going to. I was very much in a neighborhood that was a part of a lot of bullying. I was always getting the butt end of all the jokes. I was the person that people would rag on for being brown. And I remember, so for me, in terms of like the one experience I'll share was this experience I had on the soccer field. I played soccer and was very much like my friend group was my soccer team as well. Like my best friends were the people I was playing soccer with every day, and we would always be there on the field. And in a similar way, there was a few people on the soccer team that really enjoyed using my color, my race, as the butt end of all the jokes. So I was very used to that. I was just used to being ragged on all the time, bullied, even verbally. There was definitely physical altercations that happened, where I was, jumped for no other reason outside of the fact that I was just, brown. But there's one time when we were on the soccer field. I remember it was halftime, and y'all remember when sometimes if you played soccer back in the day, they used to have these oranges. They cut them into orange slices, and one of the best things to do was like to just chew on the orange slices at halftime. It was like the best. And it was like kind of scrimmaging practice, and I was about 15 feet away from a group of friends, I guess you could say, and I was like overhearing their conversation. And one of them was making fun of and ragging and mocking a Chinese family that he had heard in the mall, I guess, a few days ago. And I guess there was a family in the mall that was speaking Mandarin or Chinese. And so what this person on my soccer team was saying was, and what I overheard him say was, hey, if these people can't speak English, if they're not going to speak English, they shouldn't be in this country, and they should get the hell out of the country and not be here. And that's what I overheard him say, Now, mind you, I'm in like sixth grade, I think by now. Maybe it was like sixth grade. So I'm like, 11, 12 years old. And I was born in New Jersey, but I spent many summers in India. I spent many summers in Mumbai. Mumbai was like my second home. So I'd go to Mumbai for 2-3 months out of every year, and then I'd come back to the US. I was speaking English as my mother tongue, but I was also speaking Hindi as a part of that tongue, because my mom would speak to me in Hindi everywhere all the time. So I understood Hindi, I understood English. And at this moment, my 12-year-old mind kind of like all the neurons like fired and kind of connected the dots. And I realized that when my mom was going to pick me up from practice, which was going to be like an hour later, she was going to come out of the car and, as always, walk up to me and start speaking to me in Hindi with all the other people around. And I'm thinking to myself, oh man, like, if this kid is, and everybody else was laughing as he was saying that, right? So like all these other people on my soccer team are like huddled in a circle, and I'm overhearing it. So I realized like, oh, as soon as my mom comes and picks me up and starts speaking Hindi, they're all gonna like be thinking the same thing. Like, why are you speaking you're not speaking English. Like, you shouldn't be here. You don't belong here. And so when my mom came that day to pick me up, I remember this like it was yesterday. I like beeline, grabbed my cleats, grabbed my bag. I ran to the car. So before my mom could even like get out of the car and come to like, you know, see the other people and pick me up, I like caught her at the car, like near the street. And she starts speaking to me in Hindi. And the first thing I do is I yell and I scream at her. And I basically say, like, don't talk to me in that language. I don't want to hear that language. And that day on, I was about 12 maybe. I did not speak Hindi again until probably like, you know, my early 20s, when I went back to India to relearn the language that I lost because of racism. All I wanted to do was belong. Like, this is the greatest desire of every child on this planet. We want to belong. We want to fit in. You know, we want to psychologically feel invited and included. And I the impact of that moment caused, and I never told my mom what happened after. Like, I never told my mom why I didn't want to hear her talk to me in Hindi. Why? So then for like the next 8 years until I went to college, I would never, she would speak to me in Hindi, but I would never respond to her in Hindi. I'd respond to her in English. And oftentimes I would yell at her and tell her to stop talking to me in Hindi. And I'd say, talk to me in English. You know?
And you never told her why. You never told her why. How did that impact your relationship with her and how she related to you? Like, what was her perception of that at that time?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's tough, you know. I think it did impact our relationship on a really deep level. I really wanted nothing to do with the culture and tradition at that point. You know, I didn't want anything. I wanted to stop learning about all the things that I'd been like culturally immersed in. And so even like all the deities, the gods, the goddesses, all that stuff, like I was trying to cut all of it out of my life because I just wanted to fit into this white suburban town that I was growing up in. And I remember later on, in terms of the work I do now, and then Abdul, I want to ping this question back to you. But for me, like, the reason I believe so much of what I do today is about creating spaces where people belong, you know, and know that they belong. Like, there's nothing more important to me than for every being to know that you belong here. And I think part of the reason the organization I founded, One Common Unity, one of the things that all of our youth always say in all the evaluation metrics is, I finally found a place that I belong. You know, we have a youth program called Fly by Light. That's the name of the youth program. And it's really all about like the foundation of it is making sure all the youth know they have a place, that they belong, and that we accept you for whoever you are. And so when I think about like why I've dedicated my whole life to creating these spaces for kids, for families, for people, to heal from the tragedy of being marginalized, right? We're talking about voices of the global majority, right? Amplifying the voices of the global majority. And part of that, to me, is like, wow, it's crazy that the majority of people in the world are people of color, brown and black melanated people, yet it's our voices that have traditionally been marginalized, you know? And so for me, the work I do, I think, is connected to a series of incidents I've had in childhood that have made me feel like I don't want anyone to ever experience what I had to experience. Nobody deserves that. And so I think that's what has pushed me and propelled me to be involved the way I am. Brother Abdul, tell us what, for you, like, how is your experiences, your childhood experiences, how has that impacted the work you're doing today?
For me, I feel like I have always been raised to be self-aware, aware of who I am, but also to have faith and to be empowered. And I really owe that to my father. I remember when I was little and he would walk me around in the streets of New York, and we would literally see crackheads, junkies, bums on the street, like as we walk home. And my father would point out and he'd say, look, don't fear these people. These are your people. And one day you will come back and you will lead. And I mean, he was telling me that stuff when I was 4 and 5 years old. Now, to me, that's something that, wow, I'm so blessed to have a father and a mother that really supported me, and from an early age had me see people who looked like me that were impoverished and beat down and oppressed as still related. We are still there. I had always had an open heart, empathy, compassion for these people. And he said, one day you're gonna get educated. You're gonna stay away from drugs. So it was like a learning opportunity for me to grow up in that space and place, and also know the impact. Like, no talk. I mean, my family was religious and they were activists and civil rights activists and in the streets and the movement. And so being brought up with that identity and really understanding history, where I come from, my people, the indigenous people, and really being enrolled at an early age that this is my dharma, this is my life, is to stand for people and for humanity and for Earth and for the planet. And as I grew up in that as a lifestyle, as a way of being, the way that I react to my friends, my coworkers, etc., it just started to extend into my entrepreneurship and into my work. And I got to a place where I was challenged, inside of my social impact work and commitment to activism and to people and humanity and the freedom fight, right? And this, what I would call this distraction from what we are here to do, where I got distracted by money, flat out. And, the work, what I call human work, this so important work that we've sort of, how I would call, we've broken apart, the real work, and we've made it to make money and to be productive, versus, I love using what you called out, healing the planet, healing ourselves, the trauma from generations of the violence, the misogyny, the patriarchy, the oppression, the racism, etc. This is here. And really understanding that there is a place and space where we can stand into this love and humanity and this feeling, but also have money. And so that really has been the impact. Growing up with white friends that care about me, having the experience with that white girl that was scared and was threatened just like I was, right? Inside of this racism, it impacts all of us. A lot of people see racism and oppression and misogyny and all of the isms that bring down the vibration of humanity and separate us from our consciousness, from ourselves, from each other, right? They see that as just an issue of Black and brown people or the BIPOC community. But there is no connection, or there is no disconnection to racism and it being a white problem as well. And when that woman sits there and we all are in the impact of the violence that this sort of behavior begets, there's no difference in racism and misogyny and all of the things that comes out with that. And so my work is all about standing in a choice to sit back and live life in sort of what I would call in the flur of it, or the choice that we all have to rise up and be cause of the matter, to really be one who stands in the space and grace of being higher, right? Being something bigger and better. And so once it got clear to me that you can actually live in your career, in your space, and empower others and, stand true, that just became all that I do, all of the work. And I'm like you, an entertainer. I feel like art is a way to express yourself. It's a way to connect. Music transcends religion. Music transcends regions and countries and loyalties. It breaks down all of that kind of stuff. So as an artist and as a creator, that really has opened up, and stepping in and supporting people like you, people who share a similar ethos and who are all about changing and uplifting the planet, like Kripalu and the Yoga and Wellness Foundation, everything that's being done. So my mission is just to stand in, be contribution, and to do everything I can to uplift all of those and support all of those who are trying to do that same thing, to be the light against the oppression, the systems, and the thinking that has us separated from ourselves and from each other.
Yeah.
Mm.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you for that question.
So well said. So beautifully put, brother.
But I know that takes a lot of work, right? That's all it's stuff that really, and that's why we're here, right? It's not one conversation that we're gonna have, you know. And I know people like you. I want to throw that back to you. I know you're in the trenches, brother. You have been on that path, much like myself, for years. And you know, as you're working here, you know, in DC, embracing, you know, healthy lifestyle, mindfulness, and really teaching the youth and having that generational impact. Talk to me a little bit about some of the barriers that you have in really standing in being that change for the planet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. Like I recently stepped away from the role of being the executive director of One Common Unity. So in October, I had a huge life transition. The organization has grown tremendously in 21 years. We have a whole mental health program now where we have full-time therapists, over 15 of them that serve and work in schools with youth, providing essential mental health support for kids. We're using the arts and music as a bridge to help young people move through past trauma by telling their stories. And this is why we wanted to start with storytelling, I think, because it's so important that we have an opportunity to share the stories, because that's what allows all of us to be human again. You know, when our stories are not told, when our stories are kept and not amplified, going back to the word amplify, then, you know, there's no opportunity to have that empathy and to understand our interdependence. You know, for me, my transition from the leadership of the organization into a space now where I'm transitioning back to being a full-time teacher, a facilitator, a writer. You know, the things that brought me to the work to begin with when I started the organization, those are the things I'm moving back to now, because the past 4 or 5 years, it's been really difficult for me because I've been the head of an institution working on all the HR and the development and the fundraising and the risk management. And it's really taken me away, like looking at budgets all day. It's taken me away from what you said earlier, my dharma and why I'm here and what brings me, what makes me feel alive, what makes me feel awake. You know, the image I chose to use behind me is this image of these tree stumps that we arranged into this circle, because circles are such an important way to be in dialogue with each other. I think the barriers that I've seen for the young people here in DC to health and wellness in particular have been one of a cultural phenomenon, right? And one of accessibility and money and access because of poverty. And so there's two kind of things here to examine and to really analyze. One is culturally, for the past 30, 40 years, 50 years, health and wellness in the United States and in the Western world in general has been a privilege to explore. It's been a privilege to take the time, you know, to endeavor in spiritual aspiration, to take the time to breathe and meditate. You know, that has been something reserved for those in the middle upper class that have expendable income and expendable time. If you're working 2 or 3 jobs systemically, it's a great barrier to entry into this world of health and wellness, right? So there's this piece where there's a bridge. There's a bridge between what we see happening systemically because of poverty and access and resources to culturally, which is the health and wellness world was monopolized because of that reason, monopolized by those that are and have identified as white, because the correlation is pretty clear that those in poverty are higher degrees of melanated people. Brown and black people are those living in poverty. That's just the numbers and the facts. So when you start these spaces that were being curated, when we're seeing the magazines coming out, the yoga journals, the videos, the health and wellness videos, these are all predominantly in the mainstream being done by white identifying people. And so here in DC, as in inner cities around the country, Chicago, Boston, Miami, wherever you want to go, you have young people that are brown and black identifying young people that never saw themselves reflected within the cultural landscape of what health and wellness is, right? When I was teaching in youth prisons and going into youth prisons and working in recreation centers with kids, I would never use the word yoga to do what I was doing, even though I was a yoga teacher. I wouldn't use the word yoga to describe what I was doing with the kids, because if I said, oh yeah, let's practice some yoga, the incarcerated youth that I'm working with were just like, heck no, we're not practicing any yoga. That's for white people. And even more specifically, that's for white women. And that's not something that's for us. So I would go into the youth prisons and I would go into the inner city schools and I'd be like, all right, we're going to do some Kung Fu. We're going to do some capoeira. What's capoeira, Hawah? I never heard of capoeira. Well, capoeira is this Brazilian martial arts kind of style of dance and martial, and in that, I'm like integrating breath work, and pranayama practice. And in that, I'm integrating yoga, asana, right? And oftentimes I'd be like, yeah, we're doing Jedi training, And so like culturally, I'm framing the whole thing as like this Star Wars Jedi training. And I can't
something relatable, right? Something cool.
Exactly, something cool and relatable and culturally relevant for the kids that I'm working with, because in the West, the monopoly of meditation and yoga was one where voices like you and me were not included or even able to be included. And there's two things to that. I've been teaching yoga for 20 years. And not only have I been teaching yoga for 20 years, my family is from India. So the chants and the mantras, all these things that all these people are doing are things that I've been listening to in India since before I could walk. Meanwhile, I would try, but I couldn't get invited into these spaces to teach. Even 10 years ago, I couldn't get invited into these spaces to teach. Even when I would reach out and email, because you could see the list of all the presenters, and it was all people that were, mainly white identifying people. To no fault of anybody's, I'm just talking about the cultural phenomenon, and also not many males either, right, Abdul? Like, not many men, and so. But please go ahead.
No, I just wanted to take pause because that's huge, right? The point that you're making about inclusiveness and not seeing, black and brown people represented, and the challenges that you had even getting invited on the stage in this moment. I want to just acknowledge Kripalu for really standing in, changing that dynamic, and not just being a mouthpiece that's saying it, but standing in and having you, myself, and others, and putting together this program, because these are the platforms that we need to be invited to. right? The tables that will actually help and change the dynamics and some of the painful experiences that you and I have had. So I don't want to derail it, but I just wanted to call that out and acknowledge that this is the type of work that we're here for, to be those who stand up. Because too often I hear, especially when I got into this work, is that, hey, we want people like you there, but there's no one like you there. We can't find you guys, which is really what got Refreshment started, because of that thing. I'm much like you. Retreats all over internationally for yoga and mindfulness. I'm the only brown person there. Like sometimes there was like a woman, very rarely, but that's it. And for me, hey, it is what it is. But the reality for others that are trying to get into that space, and I was very much like you, my introduction is through martial arts. That's how I learned about breath work. It wasn't like, hey, you're meditating or breathing. You're like, you're becoming a badass kung fu master. So it's like, do all of these things that were, now as I grow up, I'm like, oh my God, this is like breath work, meditation, yoga, and Tai Chi. This is all mindfulness. But meanwhile, that was the way that as a black man, it was cool for me to do that stuff. And then 20 years later, I'm like, man, I've been doing this stuff for years. It's called mindfulness. It's called yoga. I love it. And again, just appreciate Kripalu again for opening the space and place and creating a place where Hawah and people like me and us have that to be able to share these things. And of course, our stories, I hope you all see yourselves reflected in them as well. And through this sharing, we really break these bridges that you were talking about. So
yeah.
All right, go ahead and continue.
And they're hard conversations too, right? These are not easy conversations. And if they were easy conversations, then we should be talking about something else, because we want to have the hard conversations, and we want to do it in the space of compassion, and understanding that we're all part. And as you were saying earlier, we're all part of this interwoven tapestry. And we're all in this together. But bro, you brought up something that really, I'm going to derail the conversation for a second, because you brought up something when you talk about us being just like two brothers that are out here, like for so long, and still even to this day, like the reason I stopped teaching in yoga studios in DC back in 2010, I stopped teaching in yoga studios in 2010. I used to have regular classes, and I used to be a community organizer. I was working in schools. I had like 3 lives. I was an entrepreneur, but I was like a social justice activist entrepreneur. But my yoga classes, 30, 40 people in a class, I would have 2 or 3 males, like male identifying people in an entire class. And this was just the pattern. And even to this day, when you go to like a conference, or even you go to a yoga festival, you go to some of these health and wellness spaces, and even if you go to the nonprofit sector, right? My nonprofit organization, One Common Unity, it was like pulling teeth to find male identifying people to even apply for our jobs. Our mental health therapist team is 90% female. We hold off on hiring sometimes for months because we're just waiting for a male identifying person to apply as the therapist, because our young men, brown and black men and children, need therapists that can relate to their life experience, but there's not men that are being drawn into and attracted to these spaces of the nonprofit sector, to the spaces of health and wellness. You go to some of these yoga conferences and there can be 300 people, and you can put 20 of them in a room, and those are the guys. Now, please go ahead and put comments down. Use the chat, y'all. We're here, no holds barred conversation. But I think it's really, really problematic. You know what I mean? Like, yes, and Daniel just said this call too, right? Absolutely. Like, where are the men? Why are we not showing up? And I think part of the reason we're not showing up, Abdul, now I want you to riff on me with this, is because culturally, the patriarchy has conditioned men to be so hardened to our own feelings and emotions, and that the focus, the trauma, all the men in this world undergo is the trauma of patriarchy, is that we don't feel these spaces are for us. We don't feel like we belong. So when I go to a yoga class and I'm taking the class and I'm one of 3 guys and there's 40 female identifying people, maybe a couple of transgender people also identifying, but I'm like, the men need this. The men need this more than anybody. Like, the men need to be up in here. So traumatized by the violence that we as men are conditioned to think, you know, is a part of our story and our narrative. And that's the story we have to change. How does that hit you, Abdul?
It hits me so hard in so many different ways, right? Like I feel like I could go off in a couple of different places on this, but I love sort of where you went on, you know, hitting on the patriarchy and the impact it has on men and our connection and relationship to connecting to our heart and to our emotions and feelings and all of these things that are so deeply connected to mindfulness and the work that needs to be done. And it purely has a lot to do with the mindset. But like you said, culturally, we have been programmed to behave a certain way. And even those who know about this conscious programming, for example, and I'll go down one lane just to give you an example of how the patriarchy, who perpetuates violence, and by cutting off the connection intentionally to our hearts, by making men feel as if we're wrong or bad for accessing our heart and our love and actually caring about each other, especially caring about yourself, right? You got to put your feelings aside and buck it up and do what you got to do, right? And that's what we're told from the very beginning. Don't cry, you're not a man, you know, and all of that stuff that just continues to have us holding in this trauma and this, and then it comes out, it blurs out, it comes out in all kinds of ways, whether it manifests itself in war, in racism, in controlling ways that we move, right? But where I want to touch on is this obsession with power. And this to me is at the core of all of this, right? Man's obsession with power. Women, when you look at, if you break down, we all embody both the male, the masculine and feminine. And of course, we're kind of getting into how you were born physically as the definition of man and women. But really what we're getting at is who we are as spirits and as human beings, and embodying both masculine and feminine ways of being as a holistic human being that is both logical and is both emotional, is in a space of rest and thought and contemplation, and in a space of action and ebbing and flowing with both the masculine and feminine. And when you cut off access, whether you're born as a gender male or identify as a man or woman as an identifier, once you cut off feeling all of that, like the patriarchy, men and culture has done for men, which continues to beget this power-hungry distraction with money as the end-all to power and control. It manifests itself in violence, in this zero-sum game structures that we've set up, that of course in those situations, when you look back historically, these things are structures that are set up and are ran by those that are not connected to the heart. They're not connected to the spaces and places that will heal, right? They're driven by drama. They're driven by trauma. And so one of the ways where this bleeds in and actually starts to hijack culture and exacerbate things like racism and the structures, for example, is when you look at the oppressive nature. And this really rings true to me when we get into this conversation around freedom, right? And what freedom actually means and where freedom comes from and our relationship to freedom. And a lot of your work is all about creating safe spaces where we feel included and we feel free to be, right? And so when we get at that, and when we get at this freedom and we connect the dots to, you know, the patriarchy's intentional cutting off of freedom and access and how that's manifested itself. Back then it was slavery, right? But slavery in the way we knew it is taboo. But what we're missing is this new distraction, this undercurrent that's taking place in the hijacking of our culture. For example, hip hop music, right? Hip hop music and this connection. And since most of the people on here aren't black and brown people, I'm curious, and you guys jump in the chat and let me know your relationship to rap music and hip hop culture, right? And I grew up listening to rap music and hip hop culture. And I'm here now, you know, talking about mindfulness. And when you listen to gangster rap, it's all everything but violence and misogyny and hoes and pimps and this and that. And that's what most people think about when they think about hip hop culture and rap culture. And most people think about black people and black culture being this violent, tatted up, pants down your ass, violent, killing thing as the depiction of black culture. And every movie we see, every hip hop movie video we watch, the people that we elevate in these industries, in entertainment, in music in particular, are really reflecting this stereotypical, violent, misogynistic, pimp hose type of mentality. So all those who are outside of the culture, and even those who are black growing up, indoctrinated in it, see themselves as relating to that as a way of being. And they start to then emulate this, when in fact rap music, rhythm, and poetry was all about uplifting humanity. And when it was hijacked by the industries who have done what they do, manipulated man's minds with distractions, money. And we're talking about 3 companies, Sony, right? These 3 labels who own over 90% of all of rap music and hip hop industries, labels and finances. And they perpetuate violence. They perpetuate this depiction of black culture as this horrible, degradative, disgusting thing that didn't come from us. And it is the media that owns and controls the airwaves, the TVs that take these individuals and put that up there as the epitome of black culture. And what is our role as artists, as mindful people, and as black people who are getting hijacked, their culture hijacked? And it's because of the money. These same companies that own these hip hop labels that are pushing this gangster rap, this violent depiction of culture, which started in the 90s and has continued to perpetuate and make privatized prison systems, modern day slavery. This is the plantation. But privatized prison systems, which took place in the 90s all the way through 2000s, made these arrangements. And this music is targeted our youth, black and brown youth, and makes them glorify as access out of the ghetto to be in this type of gang behavior and gang violence as the only way out to make money. This is structural. This is institutional. This is in our housing. This is in our culture. And every time you turn on these Academy Awards and these awards for music, you got Cardi B as the representation of black culture and women, and what our kids, my little niece, is shaking up behind seeing that, and that's black culture. And you guys all think that that's what it is. Meanwhile, they're using this to brainwash our people, our youth, and black and brown people to fill those prisons that they're making money from, that these same corporations that we're flipping and paying in our stock market are using black and brown people in this prison for free labor, and they're making money. And we, white people and black people like us, who are paying taxes to make these privatized prisons money, who own the labels, who are making the criminal activity and drugs and all of that popular to these black and brown people. And when you're looking at the prison systems and what that does in a direct correlation to our people, over 700% increase in prison population. United States, 5% of the global population, but 25% of the prison population. And out of that, more than 60, 70% are black and brown youth from the hood, from where I came from, targeting us so that the only thing we have culturally as a hope, right? Because the only thing we see, we're not seeing black and brown Hawah making money from teaching mindfulness and being out there providing. You're not seeing Abdul out there being depicted on TV. You're seeing what's black culture? You're seeing these ghetto, violent musicians. And you're seeing these people, even when you look at Will Smith getting up there, we're depicting ourselves as this violent thing, which justifies why they're shooting us. Why Ahmaud Arbery? You got to be scared of these people because this is what they're doing. And they constantly have hijacked us, our culture, right? In order to make everyone think that this, and this to me is very, as you can tell, very, very passionate. This is modern day slavery. This is intentional. These are the structures and the systems that have been set up to brainwash us so that you all, white people, you all non-black and brown people are getting this picture on your TV. We don't control the airwaves and CNN and all of the places where these images are being, we don't control Hollywood, where these movies, we don't control any of that. But these poor black people are getting paid and incentivized to stand up and be the new minstrels, the new clowns that perpetuate violence, that perpetuate this idea from everyone else that black and brown people are violent, scary people that deserve exactly what they get. And I'll stop there because I said a lot, but this is the truth that needs to be heard, that's going on here, that needs to be understood by not just black people, by our allies, by you all here, by mindful practitioners that are standing up for true transformation. Because if you are, then we got to get clear on this and this connection and this connection. And how can we, as mindful practitioners and activists that claim that we want transformation on the planet, how are we standing in this responsibility and dealing with these things? Because this is a problem that impacts all of us. And we will not have personal or global transformation until we address these. And this is just one way that this has manifested itself in what we're dealing with.
Yeah, no, I mean, bro, we've created an unhealthy culture based on everything you just broke down, all the systemic racism, the driving force behind so much of this is, of course, capitalism. Let's call a spade when it's on the table. The companies that you've identified, the prison industrial complex that works fervently, the war on drugs, all of that has been a part of a formula to allow those who have been profiting from the lives of people to continue to profit. And what we haven't prioritized is the health and wellness of our communities. What we have not prioritized is the healing that needs to happen and what's happened in our communities. And of course, we're speaking in some generalizations. We understand that there's amazing hip hop artists out there. We understand, we listen to
Hawah, Abdul,
Talib Kweli,
all of us.
We know there's conscious music. We know there's conscious art. We know that Bob Marley exists. We get all that. And we also understand that there has been something placed in motion which has created real barriers to brown and black people accessing the healing, the mindfulness, the spaces for the dialogue and the social emotional learning that is needed to really thrive and succeed in this world. And when we even look at the schools, I mean, school is a perfect example of how competition has decimated and destroyed the psychological and the emotional wellness of children around the globe. Because how many children have been traumatized in our schools because our schools prioritize one or two types of intelligences out of Howard Gardner's 8, 10 multiple intelligences. There's one or two that are valued in this world, right? And those one or two intelligences, if you don't possess that type of intelligence, if you're a kinesthetic learner, if you're a visual learner, if you're an auditory learner, if your brilliance is music, that isn't going to necessarily allow you to move through school with the same amount of success. And oftentimes these are the brilliant kids that are dropping out of school because they feel like they don't belong, back to belonging. They feel like there's not space for them. They feel like I'm not intelligent, I'm stupid. If you keep failing a test over and over again, at some point you start thinking I'm not smart, right? So when kids start thinking they're not intelligent, they're not smart, and they're traumatized because our schools and our systems that we've created are so wrapped up in competition and comparing each other that we've lost the individual uniqueness and the beauty that each of us brings into a space. And that's really the type of space that we're missing and that we need so desperately within our mindfulness and health and wellness communities. It's our responsibility to dismantle. It's our responsibility to reimagine what school looks like. It's our responsibility to make health and wellness and social emotional learning and how to build positive, healthy relationships and financial literacy. It's our responsibility to make that just as important and valued in our schools as math and science and history, right? And whatever flawed, censored version of history our kids are taught. Because without that bridge of connecting the intelligences, connecting the inherent value and the worth that each of us brings into this moment. And I just want to name that it's really hard to be human because the systems that we have to live in have not been designed to allow us to reach in and find our greatest gifts. So we are bound for failure because the systems we're living in are not designed to allow us to thrive. They're not based on cooperation. They're not based on mutual aid. They're not based on love, you know? And when I think of what the yoga and mindfulness community offers and why what we're doing is so important here, Abdul, is that we are creating space for everyone to have a chance, to explore empathy, compassion, kindness, generosity. These are the values which ultimately make war obsolete, So we've talked about patriarchy. We've dismantled some of the patriarchy. We've just barely touched the surface of the conditioning and how much men have really messed this world up, right? And the research is very clear too. There's some amazing research about just like, man, like women should be in charge. Absolutely. Like if women were in charge, I feel like we would not be nearly as violent of a society as we are. I think men have extremely, extremely different orientations to family. And this comes into even biology. And this is too long of a conversation to have. It's 8:15. So we gotta keep pushing. But Abdul, I appreciate you for pushing me and all the time we've had together, to get into it, over the past few months as we've been kind of like getting a chance to learn about each other as this Amplify Voices series has been coming up. We really believe that there's space for all this to happen. And we invite you to come with us on this journey. Myself personally, I'm working on a project right now called Roots to Sky Sanctuary. Me and 3 friends, we just got 125 acres of land and we're creating a space for healing trauma. So for me, like I've always loved Omega and, Kripalu and all these incredible health and wellness centers and spaces for yoga, but traditionally, like it's been inaccessible for the communities I work in. I've been working in DC for 20 years with youth and families that are on the edge of poverty and living in poverty. They can't spend $500 to go to Omega for a weekend. Like that's just not possible. They can't go on a yoga retreat. That's not possible. So like, it's been my dream to create a space outside of the city that's specifically oriented to provide access to the type of Eastern integrated healing modalities that otherwise have not been accessible to youth and families living in poverty. So that's kind of what I'm working on and building right now with some friends. We're working on this yoga, healing arts and justice center. We're doing a lot of indigenous wisdom keeping. We're working with indigenous elders here on the land. to bring us back to rites of passage and to find out how to really call people back in. Not calling people out, but calling people in. It's time to bring people in. We need to all come together, and that's our work. It's calling people in. Abdul, do you got any last things? We're supposed to do some. I think you're going to do. I could do like 3 breaths, and then you could take us through a quick meditation, and then we can get into Q&A before we close out at 8:30.
Sure. Thank you so much, brother, for that acknowledgement, and back at you, man. It's just been great getting to know you, learn about what you're up to, and just really feel deeply connected to others that are also passionate and on the court playing. It's always great, like, bro, yes, there's more of us. And so obviously to continue to build that space and to be invited. And thank you, Kripalu, for having us on, sharing our story and the commitment. And I hope this is not the first, right? Because this is, we just scratched the surface. We didn't really get into this. So much I want to dig in that you brought up to really unpack. And I think that it would be super valuable, not only for those on the call, but for others, for us to continue the conversation. So I want to throw that out there. For me in particular, refreshment.co is our mindfulness and mental health platform by BIPOC community for everyone. This is some of the things we were talking about earlier, really looking at how we aggregate Black purchasing power and really generate programming that resonates with the Black experience. And so we're really working on that. I provide breath work and meditation. And we work with several organizations like Modern Ohm, like True Nature Travel. Much like yourself, we're trying to create safe spaces where we get the corporate sponsors and corporate wellness to pay for BIPOC mindfulness facilitators to show up, do programming like this. And what we do in return is we take a percentage out of all of that paid work from corporations and from organizations like Kripalu and the like. And then we go ahead and we take youth from our Quality Life Center in the communities that we serve, the Black and brown communities that we serve. We mash up and provide mindset and mindfulness teaching and training to them, sound healing, breath work, meditation, etc. And we match them with different areas. So with True Nature Travels, for example, we're working on putting together retreats where these youth who have never traveled, a lot of them have never even traveled out of their zip code, if you can believe it or not, but they're like 18, 19 years old. It's crazy. And we are trying to be able to take them out of that situation so that energetically they can have that safe space where we have more than just an hour and a half to really tap in and unpack a lot of the healing and the trauma that needs to happen for these youth and then provide them that service. We also started Ready Made Entertainment, where I know sound like I was bashing on hip hop and rap music earlier, but it is because I love it so much. And like many of you stated, there are great conscious hip hop artists out there, and we really want to elevate those voices. We want to empower them with marketing and creativity so that they're seen and heard, so that we have the voice, because right now it's owned and controlled by those in media. And that's why, even though I agree, like there's so much beautiful, uplifting, positive hip hop out there, it's not really mainstream and you don't really see it that much because of who controls the media, the airwaves, and all of the distribution channels that are consistent with making money for that music. So readymade.media is our entertainment company that's all about creating positive music that uplifts and really brings awareness to the violence and the drug addiction and abuse that is indicative of traditional gangster rap, and putting on experiences for schools and our nonprofit that really bring that message to light and really bring that spirit and the energy of mindfulness into the hip hop music. So as an entry point, we then get to what Hawah said, Jedi mind trick them into really being aware of the power and the energy that's available through just the way they think, and bringing that to the streets as opposed to bringing guns and hoes to the streets. So that's what I'm up to. I appreciate you all. Check me out on Instagram or LinkedIn. And
we're still going, Abdul. We got Q&A over here still, bro. We're still going. Yeah. So Monique, I'd love to create some space. It seems to make more sense to just do a couple of questions first and then close with breathing instead of trying to do breathing right now. So we've got like 7 or 8 minutes. If there's any questions, maybe now's a good time to just throw some questions out there, and then we can close out with a couple of breaths.
So I do see a question here from Susan N, and I think either of you could answer it. How do you maintain your equanimity with so much ignorance around racism on the part of white folks or anywhere that you encounter uh, that ignorance? If either of you or both want to answer.
How do we, can you repeat that again? How do we retain
The
the
question is, how
equanimity
do you
when?
maintain your equanimity with so much ignorance about racism on the part of white folks? Is a question in the chat.
I mean, for me, I just go back to, I mean, what a little bit of what I was saying earlier. I mean, I just feel like we're all human, and I do believe that all of us are personally accountable for our words, our actions, and our thoughts. And I also believe in something Mahatma Gandhi said. One of my favorite quotes. He says, "We can't make people good, but we can create the conditions to be easier for people to choose." And for me, the world that we are all being brought up in, and this is where I have so much compassion for men as well, as we're working through the trauma of being brought up in patriarchy, and the women that have to deal with the violent men, and the white identifying people that may be like really insensitive to the plight of brown and black people in this world. I mean, to remain equanimous is to remain, for me, compassionate in understanding that everyone is on their own journey, and everybody is also has the potential to change and to transform. And we do that by holding space for each other. That's how I remain equanimous, is just always rooting myself and remembering that, like, a really racist person probably was brought up in a space where racism was very much accepted. You know, they were also conditioned to be racist. And instead of blaming the people individually, I like to look more also at like the conditions that are permitting these kinds of behaviors. So I don't blame people. I really think about transformation on a global scale as connected to our ability to shift culture, consciousness, and systems. Abdul?
It's a great question. For me, it really is the mindfulness component of it, and really focusing my energy and effort on the things that I can control, and really doing everything I can, and this is something just in the mindset, and I'm getting into mind development mastery and some of the work that I do, and it's for mindset training. And what that is really about taking ownership of the world around you. And yes, there are ignorant white people, there are ignorant black people. I struggle just as much when I listen to black people talk smack about white people because their experience that they had was a bad experience. So the way I keep my equanimity is really by understanding that I am a reflection of all of us, period. I am a reflection of all of us, period. I'll say it one more time. I am a reflection of all of us. And if I'm experiencing ignorance, racism, hatred, oppression, that is simply an opportunity for me to shine, for me to be a reflection, for me. And that level of empowerment and true ownership of the world around you provides that level of equanimity for me. Because every time, like in the story that I shared, I have been blessed where, despite the fact that I have come across ignorance, racism, violence, and all of that stuff, I have had my best of friends are white people. I joined a Jewish fraternity, and I was raised in a Muslim family. My name is Abdul Haq Muhammad, for God's sake. I was speaking Arabic, right? But I'm a Pi Lambda Phi. I go to bar mitzvahs. My boys, my people, I'm a Buddhist. My dad studied martial arts, and it's like I have been blessed to just be open, and that provides me this love for everyone. And this is the Dharma. This is what it's about. And inside of the hatred and ignorance and racism that exists, I understand, just like Hawah was saying, we're all just part of our precondition, of our condition, right? And I understand that all of us in our journey, this individual journey, is this unlearning, right? And who we are inside of this conversation, right? And all of you standing here, reflecting back and here for this conversation gives me the hope. That gives me everything I need to be like in the face of Ahmaud Arbery being shot and seeing in front of the world the horrific act of another human being kneeling on someone's neck and letting them die like that while people stood around and watched. Despite all of that happening, right? We're here. We're right here. We are right here. And all of us, every single one of you, every single one of you, we all have the power right now, to change all of this. And that, resting in that, breathing that in, meditating on that, letting that be what leads me and what I believe in and what I believe to choose, that provides me that access, that equanimity for me to move by and see every individual human being that is ignorant and that is oppressive or violent or whatever as an opportunity for me to shine bright and show the opposite of that, and to enroll as many people as I can until the day I die to stand up for freedom and inclusiveness for all of us. That for me is the answer.
Thank you. You both offered us a lot of very specific tools and strategies and broad ideas to maintain equanimity and to continue to stand in the work and to see our connections to one another. So thank you both for the responses. And we've got like 30 seconds. If you'd like to guide us in a breath, that could be a wonderful way to conclude our time together this evening.
Go ahead, Hawah. Take us out.
Absolutely.
Take us inward.
Absolutely. Well, wherever you are, thanks for journeying with us for the past 90 minutes. I just invite you to sit. If you're comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. If you prefer, you can keep your eyes open and just look down towards the ground with your gaze. And feel the breath moving in through the nose. Draw it down into the belly. And as you exhale, feel your shoulders soften. As you breathe in hope for our children. And as you breathe out, you can let go of any feelings of pessimism you might have in this moment. Take a deep breath in and feel yourself filling with compassion for yourself. And then as you exhale, feel yourself letting go of any fear of inadequacy. Last collective breath, drawing the air deep into the belly. And then bring your hands up over your heart. You can bring one palm over the other. And as you exhale, you can relax your whole body. Feel yourself softening into this community, this wonderful space we're so grateful for. And as you come back into just a rhythmic, organic breath, we'll send a lot of love to the staff at Kripalu for organizing and coordinating this important series of conversations, and send a lot of love to all those that are on the front lines, Extend your heart, your being to those that are out there. Not creating division, but creating unity and creating bridges for empathy and perspective. The light in me honors the light in you. Ashe, Aho, Mitakwayase, Ahankatu, Hariom. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Monique. Thanks, Abdul.
Aho.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you
brother.
so much.
Thank you
And
all.
thank you everyone for joining us. We hope to see you again next week for our final installation in this Amplify series. And you can catch up on all the videos on our website. Thank you, everyone. See you next
Thank
time.
you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.